Hey folks, Nathan P. Butler here with another content overview for Final Girl, and honestly, this one came completely out of nowhere in October of 2025. We know that in the past, they have been offering Final Girl Series 1 and 2 alternate killer miniatures. We've looked at the original set for Series 1. We've looked at the ones for Series 2 actually relatively recently here. But as you may recall, they were no longer available through the web store. They hadn't been producing them because they'd been producing them in the United States, and their machinery was having issues, so they were not producing the alternate killer miniatures. Well, it turns out that now there is essentially a restock of these, but it's in a different way. There are now actually two versions of each series currently available. Three if you count the original packages. There are now pre-shaded versions of the alternate killer miniatures from Series 1 and from Series 2, or you can get these boxes here without the shading, where they're just gray miniatures. And there's still a difference in terms of quality between the original releases and even the gray versions of these. I didn't get the gray versions, I got the pre-shaded versions here because I do like that look, that Sundrop-esque look. So we're going to take a look at these, comparing them to the originals, both in terms of just the look of the individual miniatures, but also a little bit about the difference in what to expect from these versus if you pick them up from those original packages, just in case you want to pick up even the gray versions of these new ones, or kind of new ones. And you know what? I almost forgot to mention it, so I guess I should. I am a playtester for Final Girl, starting with Series 3 onward. But no, I had no inkling that these were coming, and yes, I just bought these myself from the VRG website. They were not provided by Ryder Games. But if you think being a playtester will color my opinion, even though being a big fan of it was what led me into playtesting, well, there's your disclaimer. So here's the packaging for the new Series 1 set, marked as pre-shaded, hence the shading there. They're not gray. So Final Girl Series 1 alternate killer miniatures pre-shaded. Basically the same thing on this side, same thing on that side, same thing on the top, and on the bottom, it's all that address, legalese, and UPC stuff that you would expect somewhere on the package. The back says includes miniatures for the following feature film killers: Hans, Poltergeist, Ink and Yamba, Geppetto, and Dr. Fright. Ah, the classics. As usual, they're kept nice and safe in the packaging. It says S1 here, has Final Girl. You actually have to lift off the lid to be able to get to any of the miniatures inside. They're not just banging around. Before we compare, let's also look at the packaging for Series 2. So Series 2, alternate killer miniatures, Final Girl pre-shaded. Again, same thing on the top, the side. The other side's got all that stuff on it. Then there's identical there. And then the back includes miniatures for the following feature film killers: Evomorph, Organism, Intruders, Big Bad Wolf, and Ratchet Lady. And again, as we saw recently with the original release of the Series 2 alternate killer miniatures that are relatively rare at this point, the Evomorph just has the adult. You do get the 3 Organism versions, Big Bad Wolf, the 3 Intruders, and Ratchet Lady, but Evomorph is just the adult. There is no alternate version of either of the other 2 forms of the Evomorph. Then again, inside, they're all there, S2, and a nice little Final Girl cover to keep them safe. So from Series 1 with Hans, we have the original Hans here, with the sledgehammer behind him. We have the gray version, the original gray version of Hans here, with the head in one hand, the hatchet in the other. And now there is a Sundrop, so to speak, a pre-shaded version of Hans. So let's kind of compare here. So the original miniatures from the feature film boxes are relatively well defined, and they're relatively sturdy, even a small piece like that sledgehammer handle. The original version of the alternate ones were being produced in the US with a different process on a different machine, and they are a slightly different material, it would seem. So between the printing process and the material, they tended to be a little bit more flimsy, though you can't really tell it with Hans. I'll point it out on some of the ones where you really can. And sometimes the definition came through well, sometimes not as much. These new ones here are being made in China, not in the US, so they're not using the same material or the same machine as the original alternates, but they are using the same sculpts. But that means that they are actually less flimsy because they're basically the same material, from what I can tell, as the original ones that you got in those season miniature packs and whatnot, so that you could just put them in originally. The alternate versions are now of that same quality and being printed on machines that give a little bit more definition. So you won't see as much of an issue with the definition kind of fading or disappearing on you, whether it's pre-shaded or not. Pre-shaded really gives a lot of definition to the nooks and crannies. But even with the non-shaded new packaging versions that look like the packaging we just saw, they just don't say pre-shaded, you're still going to get something that is sturdier and has more definition on average than what we got in the original alternate packs. A little more on par with the regular miniature packs. Then we have Poltergeist from Series 1. This was her original miniature, you may recall. A very different pose. The alternate, and this is one that helped to sort of solidify in my mind the idea that they were a little bit more flimsy in the original alternate packs, because my original pack, her head was snapped clean off. And then here's the pre-shaded new one. Again, you can just see a little bit more definition, but in this case, the definition is primarily not coming from the print, it's coming from the shading. It'll vary. Then Ink and Yamba, his original pose here. It looks like it should be very easily breakable, but as long as you don't screw with it too much here, it's not crazy so because of that harder plastic in the regular miniature set. Then here's the original alternate mini. Looks cool, but notice a little bit of definition lost in the print there. And then here is him, or you can really kind of see the face with the pre-shading. Yeah, kind of giving you these side by side. So there is a slight size difference. I wasn't noticing that on the other ones, but it looks like there is just a little bit of a size difference here. They do have the names on the bottom, as usual. And I hadn't noticed it before, but this is enough of a size difference that given the choice, I'm actually not going to store this one inside the box. I'm going to keep those miniature boxes for the alternate killer miniatures with pre-shading, because I'm a little bit concerned with the slightly larger height that I might snap something off if I keep it in there and I'm too rough with it. It's not fragile, it's just a little bit bigger, so a little bit tighter of a fit in there. Before I move on, I should note it looks like Poltergeist is about the same size, as is Han. So far, only Inky is bigger. Then, of course, we have Geppetto, original, extra tasty crispy. First alternate set, pretty well defined there. And then the even more well defined new version pre-shaded, size-wise, essentially the same. And then the Doctor is in with Dr. Fright, his original version, and then the very different alternate, and the new version, basically the same size there. This one, of course, being pre-shaded. I feel like I can see more definition with the face on this version than this version. They're very close, but you see a little bit more definition with the swirls on the face on the new version. Then moving on to Series 2, we have the Evomorph, who of course has the hatchling and youngling miniatures that don't get replaced by an alternate. We have the original version of the mini. Then we have the alternate that we just saw fairly recently. Pretty decent definition here. This is the one, though, aside from that, that's not for me. This is the one where it came separated because it was just glued on there. The feet glued to the box and the ground. And then here's the pre-shaded newest printing, which from what I can tell, can't actually tell if it's glued or if that is actually part of a mold there. But a little bit more defined, not terribly so, mostly a difference because of the shading. And also same size. Then we've got the Big Bad Wolf, who I think is probably the one, or one of the ones that benefits the most from the shading, because I really have a hard time telling if there is a definitional difference. I think there is. So here's the original. Here is the first print version of the alternate. Yeah, I guess definition, especially on the back, you'll see a difference here. And then new printing, pre-shaded. Essentially the same size. I mean, you can see the musculature. It just doesn't show up as much without the shading. But on the back, especially with the tail there, you can see a bit of a definitional difference. Then also from Series 2, we got Ratchet Lady with her original that I nearly dropped just then. Alternate, relatively well defined here. And new alternate with shading, same size. You can get a little bit more definition to the face. It's kind of hard to tell, honestly, I think. I do think she might have a slight pose difference with how she's actually holding that knife up at the top there. Very slight. Then the first of the two multi-killer boxes, we have the Intruders with the original Trish. The first US printed alternate and the new Chinese produced wash alternate. See a little bit of a definitional difference, but not a ton for this one. And for what it's worth, that definitional difference will depend on probably your copy as it was being produced. So here's Zeke, original, laid out to the side. Zeke, alternate, laid out to the side, but standing now on a rooftop. And then for side-by-side comparison, effectively the same size. Zeke, newest printing, shaded. And then finally, Baghead with his pipe out to the side. Baghead holding the pipe over his head as the alternate. Feels a little smooth, a little bit rough edges here, like around his pants. Then here is the new one. So a little bit more definition here. You can tell for Baghead, at least again in my copy. And then finally, also with 3, we have the Organism. So we start with Strong, the two-faced one here. This is the original mini. This is that early alternate. And here is the current alternate. I feel like, for the most part, this one is mostly defined. I think most of the difference here, not all, but most of this here, just comes from the shading. Then we have Tough, that weird gaping maw kind of thing going on here. That's the original. Here's the first alternate, like a leg sticking out of his maw there. And then the pre-shaded new printing. Just a bit more definition on all those interesting nooks and crannies. But not a ton. You can actually see the nooks and crannies on this one. It's just that the shading brings them out. Then finally we got Fast, the original kind of crouched one on all fours. This is probably the one where I see the biggest difference. This is the original version I got for the alternate, and this is the new. And notice the new one here, it is leaning forward a little bit more by a tiny bit, but man, look at that definition difference. That is almost a night and day difference on this one. So there you have it, folks. A look at the new pre-shaded Series 1 and Series 2 alternate killer miniatures for Final Girl. Again, you can now get these in pre-shaded or simple gray, no shading at all, in this style of packaging. If you see this style of packaging, it says no pre-shaded, that means it's gray. If it says pre-shaded, it's this type. Then you know that it's this new print run. It's the ones that are being produced in China rather than the US. The material is different. It is more sturdy, and the print quality is, in many cases, or at least some cases, better, simply because of the machine being used to produce them in the first place. The only one that seems to be a scale difference, from what I can tell, is Nkenyamba. And that may be because, as small as he was, his blades were very breakable. If you're wondering about the price difference between shaded and non-shaded, it is $5, at least as of right now as I'm recording this. So if you avoided picking up the alternate miniatures before because you were like, yeah, I don't know, I hear these things about the quality of them compared to the other ones, well, that is no longer an issue. And if you're still on the fence, maybe the shading will draw you in. I really hope they do more of this pre-shaded stuff for the miniatures from the other series, for the final girls themselves, for the vehicles. I hope this is the start of a trend, even if it does mean getting a bunch of miniatures all over again. I've loved the presence of Sundrop style miniatures, or in this case, pre-shaded miniatures, ever since the original Nemesis. Given the option, I'll always take it. We'll be back with more Final Girl product content overviews as more are released. The next should be A Rotten Harvest, the second feature film from Series 4.